Welcome to the Bros of Gardening. I'm Mike Westphal, and I'm joined by my co-host, as always, Daniel Van Dyke. How you doing today?
I'm doing good, bud. I've got no complaints. How about yourself?
Doing well. And we're also joined by Alex, who now we're keeping in front of the camera. We liked it so much last time that we're going to keep on doing it. So
thank you for having me.
Yeah. So just adding to the Bros of Gardening. So thanks for joining us today. We have a really cool topic, one right up Daniel's alley, which is coastal landscaping. We're in the Hampton Roads area. We've got lots and lots of homeowners that live very close to the coast and to the water, and even people that maybe aren't right on the water want that coastal feel because that's where they live. But I think it's cool to kind of talk about this topic, for the whole country, because you can do these things no matter where you live. If you live in the mountains, if you live in, a hot area or a colder area, you can still get that kind of, coastal feel if that's something that you miss or that you want around you. I mean, we always talk about taking a backyard vacation, a staycation.
Absolutely.
So, if you want that feel in a small portion of your yard, or if you want it over your entire landscape, we can help you design that and help you figure out some ideas on how to bring that coastal idea into your own backyard. I don't know if you got any other comments on that.
No, I mean, I think that's perfect. And like that, that's one of the differentiating factors is, are you truly landscaping on the coast, or are you just trying to kind of, create that aesthetic? And so that's where you'll have different obstacles and different things and everything. I always say every landscape is specific to the yard that it's going into. And so paying attention to different things like your soil and stuff, if you are truly doing coastal landscaping. But again, trying to create that aesthetic, you can do it anywhere. There are certain choices you can make. It might not necessarily be a big palm tree or something to that effect, but you can still try to kind of create that aesthetic different ways. And so it's one of our most popular, especially being in, the Virginia Beach area.
Right.
There are a lot of waterfront, a lot of beach, but just that kind of beach feel. It's a beach town to some extent. And so I think people really embrace that and almost take pride in it to some extent.
Exactly.
And I think a lot of times that's a reflection of your landscape. So yeah, it's a very popular one. And so I'm excited to get into it.
Cool. Well, yeah, let's talk real quick about, because you brought it up and it's a little boring, but it's essential to kind of understand the soil.
Sure.
Because I think when we talk about soil, when you're planting and just, a typical dirt, we talk about amending it. And so we typically recommend amending any kind of dirt with a compost or perlite. And those are things that you amend your soil with. So it's a third your soil, a third compost, a third perlite. So that's what we always recommend people to do. But if you have sandy soil, so if you're literally on the coast, you actually want to change that slightly.
Absolutely.
I would recommend peat moss. I don't know. Is that what you would recommend?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Because the perlite's not really needed with the sand just because of the drainage aspect of it. So what you're actually looking for now is a little more water retention, a little bit more moisture retention. So yeah, I think peat moss is certainly what we use. There are other products that you can use, but that's one that we've been using for as long as I've been doing it. And so we always kind of up, and use a little bit of extra peat moss when we know we're working on the water in those sandy soils.
Yeah, because certainly you can plant in some plants directly in sandy soil, but you always want a little bit of something that's going to hold the water when you're initially getting a plant established. So I think that's a little bit of a boring thing, but an essential thing when you're planting, in very sandy soil. Omit the perlite. You've already got it because sand is basically going to give you that perfect drainage. So you're trying to thicken up your soil and add some water holding. So that's why you do peat moss and maybe some compost, just to add some nutrients and some different things. So that's a great place to start, but we'll turn it over to you, Alex, to ask a question and get us going on this topic.
Well, I'm pretty excited about this one because I love the beach. So anything I can learn more about this, the better. All right. So for our first one, what is one landscape design feature that instantly makes the yard feel more coastal, no matter where you are?
Yeah.
So yeah, this is one that we've mentioned them a few times, but it's just ornamental grasses. So ornamental grasses it's such a large category of plants. But again, they're very, very low maintenance. They're very hardy. They obviously, they can grow right there on the coast. If you're at the beach, you see them all over the place. It can be, there's miscanthus, pennisetum. There's so many different varieties. But again, they also are extremely hardy in the sense that it doesn't have to have a certain environment to thrive. We've planted them in parking lot medians that are nowhere near the water, but they are still in Virginia Beach, and they want to kind of have that
coastal
feel. And we've put those in medians without irrigation. And once they establish, there's really not much to, as far as taking care of them. And so, but again, whenever you think of like an oceanfront, coastal, the breeze and everything that comes with that. And grasses kind of have this whimsical effect, and they have interest all throughout the year. Even when they go dormant, they still have this beautiful kind of golden look to them.
Yep.
Their plumes a lot of times will stay up, and they'll still kind of, like I said, kind of blow with the wind. And so they kind of dance around, as I like to tell people. And so ornamental grasses, you can get some, muley grass, you can get pink. I mean, a lot of them are more white. But again, it's just it's a very, very low maintenance, versatile, and you can get some that stay 1.5 feet tall. You can get some that get 10, 15 feet tall. And so,
mix them. I mean, I think, put a bunch of them out there in lots of different places, massing maybe singular ones and then rows of them. I mean, the more grasses that you have, the more coastal and beachy you're going to feel.
Well, that also is more authentic to the actual beach itself. Because you go out to Sandbridge, and I mean, there's not one particular plant. There's multiple different ornamental grasses that are out there.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And sea oats is actually a great grass that, you kind of, hence the name.
Yeah. Well, and again, that goes back to, if you're talking truly, and so the way, Alex said for anywhere, but if you're on the coast and you have to worry about flooding, and there's all of that comes in, but a lot of those types of grasses and stuff can take, they can be submerged in water for long periods of time. And so
they can take a ton of water. They can take hardly any water.
Exactly.
I mean, they're just
it's versatile. And so if you have tidal flooding and if you're truly coastal landscaping and you have things like tidal flooding, that's another one that's just, it's a good one to take a look at, because it can really thrive in your front yard where there's none, and then in the backyard if you're trying to get continuity between two areas that are in completely different environments.
Yeah, I think of like when I go down to Nag's Head, or that's kind of where it's funny. We live in the Virginia Beach area. We're close to Virginia Beach, and a lot of us vacation in Nag's Head, which is in North Carolina. But typically if you're in a cottage anywhere along the eastern seaboard or western seaboard, I think you typically see a lot of blues.
Yeah.
So, blue to me is what I look for to kind of start a coastal landscape, whether it's blue pottery, a blue umbrella, blue cushions on your outdoor furniture. It could be, blue plants. It could be like Russian sage. There's lots of salvias that have that bluish color. There's bluish colored foliage. So, you see junipers a lot used in kind of this coastal look. So blue is a hard one because there's not a lot of blue blooming plants, but you can kind of get the sense of that. I mean, rosemary, we talked about rosemary before. It's a very durable, easy plant. It blooms with a kind of a bluish kind of lavender flower. So I think that's an easy one to kind of say, hey, if you're thinking about getting into this coastal, start to look at some blue hues and bringing those around the landscape, because I think that kind of starts to help you feel like coastal.
Yeah, and the sea oats, definitely just looking at them like that is what I think of quintessential, like the beach.
beach plant.
Yep. All right, so for the next one, what is the biggest rookie mistake people make when trying to achieve a coastal landscape?
So I think for me, it's just ignoring climate appropriate plant material.
Yep.
So again, I mean, depending on where you are, kind of the theme of what we're talking about is how to achieve this, look and this kind of theme and aesthetic through different things. But I referenced earlier, not everybody can have a palm tree, so that's really the problem, is when you picture coastal, you picture tropical, these types of things, Miami, whatever the case may be. We're actually working on a project right now that is Miami inspired, but again, you're trying to make choices
have the same plants
that are appropriate for this area, but still kind of give you that same look. And so that's really what it is, especially now when you can ship and order plants online, you can do all this stuff. So if you want to go find it, you can go find certain plant material. Or, the other side of that is just embrace the temporary aspect of it. We call, what you said something on one of the podcasts about houseplants were never grown as houseplants. It's just that's what they are here in our climate. And so if you accept the fact that these are essentially annuals, you can use pretty much whatever you want, throughout the summer and stuff like that. So you can have a very, coastal tropical look. But it's going to be a temporary solution. And so I think just paying attention to your zone, which we've talked about, if you're looking for something that's going to survive the winter, you're looking for something that's going to be a staple of your landscape. Don't ignore your climate restrictions. It can be frustrating. You see something you love and you look it up online, and all of a sudden it's not going to grow in this area. It can be disappointing. It can be disheartening, but you're investing your own time, your own energy, and your own resources into your landscape. So you don't want to make the mistake of just going with what, not doing a little bit of research on it and seeing if it is something that is going to survive in your area. And so, and that kind of goes back to what we talked about with the soil. It's not the fun part of it, but it's a very important step in the process if you want your landscape to thrive. So I would say pay attention to your climate. Don't ignore the restrictions in those zones, because they're there for a reason, and it's setting you up to hopefully have as much success as possible
for sure.
Landscape.
I think a lot of people have, something in their landscape, right? Nobody's got a blank slate and they're like, hey, I'm just going to start a coastal landscape design. So I would say don't go start ripping everything out to create a blank slate, because there's a lot of probably elements that you already have that would maybe even work. And my other recommendation would be don't feel like you got to do it all in one weekend. I mean, if you want to be a weekend warrior, by all means, we can help you. Daniel, they'll go and change a landscape over in a day to, a week. And you can come home after taking a couple days, vacation somewhere else, and you'll have a whole brand new landscape. But I would say to caution people, if they're thinking about doing themselves, start small. I mean, maybe it's a couple Adirondack chairs with some grasses nearby.
Absolutely.
I mean, create a little nook in your landscape that kind of makes you feel like the coastal living's there. So you can think big, and we want to help you think big, but sometimes it's good to kind of start small and don't go just ripping everything out, because we might be like, hey, we're going to recommend this plan. And you're like, I just took all of those out of my yard.
Yeah.
So
no,
that would be my thing.
It's funny you say that, because I always tell people, it sounds a little redundant, but it's like once you rip it out, once you cut all the roots and everything, unless you dig it to specifically be a transplant, which is a different process. A lot of times people hook it up to the back of a truck and just go
rip it out.
And so it's a really good point, because a lot of times you can prune things certain ways. I mean, you can really make, some existing material work, or even just plantings around, something that's a dark broadleaf evergreen doesn't feel coastal, but
it's a backdrop.
Exactly. And then you can go with, plumbago, like you said, those blues, or something to kind of soften it up, or even just like some rows of grasses, but you still need that green behind it.
Exactly.
So it's a good point is get a plan, plan before you start that.
We've talked about it many times. So go back. If you haven't heard some of our previous podcasts, go back. We've talked about pruning and kind of bringing plants back to life if you're worried about, the shape or the size of them. And then we've also talked about, the different things that you can accomplish, and planning is always going to be necessary whenever you want to tackle any kind of project in your yard.
Do palm trees thrive in this area? Well,
there's only one that we really recommend, which is the windmill palm. Okay. There's a lot sold, I think, in this area, that sagos and palmettos, and some that you're going to see more in North Carolina and South Carolina. Mm-hmm. But windmill palms are the one that we will sell and feel very comfortable about the fact that it should come back each year.
Yeah, and windmills are one that the Eddie Anderson, who started McDonald Garden Center here, he has actually grown. He's grown his own windmill palms, and he's propagated them. He's got them from seed, and he's been growing them. And I think some of them are up into 15-gallon pots now. Yep. And so that just goes to show that one obviously does really well. Yeah.
To get a palm that actually will bloom and seed in our area means that it likes our area.
Yeah,
that's good. Yeah, no, this is definitely one I've seen around for sure, but I've also seen others where I'm like,
I don't know. I've seen some people planting some things, and I'm like, that ain't gonna make it.
Yeah. Well, like I said, we get the requests all the time, and the worst thing I always tell you, the last thing I want to do is tell a customer, no, we can't do that. And I always tell them, like, we can do it. It's just
this is what the
our
outcome
goal
will
is
be.
To set you up for success. Yeah. And the last thing we want to do is plant something where you're going to call us in a couple months and say, hey, this died. And so that's why sometimes those conversations aren't the most fun when you're trying to get somebody excited about the landscape, but they are necessary.
Yeah. All right, cool. Okay, so let's see, what else do I got here? How do you design a coastal yard that still feels private while also not blocking the view?
Sure. Yeah, so I think obviously the view is going to be all about sight lines, and it is definitely something that we get a lot. When you're on the water or something like that. And so this would be obviously this is a truly coastal landscape that we're talking about, and so 9 times out of 10 that's going to be directly back. You're just what you're trying to take a look at, and so a lot of times what we'll do is you can kind of frame up the edges. You get the privacy, whether that's a privacy hedge. You block kind of your neighbor. But then as you move down the backyard, you can step those hedges down. You can step the plant material down. So it's a little bit more of like a tiered privacy in a sense where you can still get some bones along the edges, so it kind of differentiates and delineates your yard versus your neighbor's yard.
Yep.
But you kind of highlight the actual privacy. When I think of privacy, I'm thinking at least 6-7 feet. Even up to maybe 20 feet, whatever the case may be. Just kind of selectively choose that location where, okay, if you have an eyesore, whether it's a neighbor's shed that you don't like looking at, or it's a, something that, or just a house, or you have a hot tub, or whatever your need for privacy is, focus on that area. Don't just plant it all the way down where a lot of times you can just box in a backyard, which is a really cool thing to do.
Yep.
It feels so private.
Yeah.
I mean, actually just a personal one with my dad, he planted Chinda viburnums all the way around his entire backyard. Wow. It's one of the most private backyards I've ever been in. It doesn't have a fence. It doesn't have anything. And so it's a really cool thing. But if you're trying to look at the water, that'd be the last thing you want to do. So it's just be strategic about where you pick and sit out there and say, okay, this is the view I want to see.
Right.
And this is the views I don't want to see. I mean, it sounds basic, but that's really what it is. And then say, okay, what can I do to block that? And, on our one of our earlier podcasts, Mike mentioned autumn rocket camellias. So then it's trying to find certain things that will create that privacy, those hedges that maybe don't get too wide, they don't get as massive. And then again, you can kind of just like step them down to where you still have that delineation between your yard and your neighbor's yard, but you're not necessarily trying to create privacy towards the back end of the yard.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think there's, a little bit of like, you're trying to create this feeling, but trying not to block sight lines. So look at different ways of kind of blocking different areas. I mean, you mentioned like the wind. Do we want to control the wind? Do we want less wind? I typically think of the worst wind being in the winter. You're trying to keep the winter winds kind of out. So you look at like how they used to plant, plants around old, houses out in farmland, which is, a house sitting out in a very exposed part of the country. Typically you're going to have a shade tree on the, southwest side, so you're blocking that hot afternoon sun to shade it in the summer. But then in the winter, you're typically going to see just a random row of hedge plants, out there in the farmland. And it's like, why is that there? Well, it's to protect the northeast side of the house. Okay. So it prevents those northerly winds from that winter wind. So, there's that option. So if that's not going to block your entire sight line, then that would be a good option. I think of live oaks. Yeah. I mean, in the area that we live in, we see windswept live oaks, as you drive down any of the shore, drives and any of the roads on the that are closest to the coast. They do very well. They're extremely slow growing. So I'm not going to say go plant a live oak because you're going to be enjoying it, and you would be in about 50 to 60 years. They're extremely slow growing, but they can take, the salt water. Yep. But they create this bit of a block. They're evergreen, which is kind of different for an oak tree. So they always have leaves on it. So always going to block some wind. But you get, a canopy that's higher, so it's going to block and create a little bit more of that intimate setting while you can still see underneath it and see through it. I think of Hollywood juniper too. Absolutely. Hollywood juniper, big evergreen shrub, kind of looks like a hand. If you put your hand up and kind of spread it out, it's kind of got all these big fingers that kind of come out. And that creates the ability to see through it, but also create a bit of a privacy feeling.
I've definitely seen plenty of these. This is actually really cool.
And I think that's what it is you're going away from the norm of privacy hedges. I mean, privacy hedges are something we sell a ton of. It's something that's very, in high demand. But, you can even do, like we talked about with the grasses, is there's grasses that get different sizes. So if you do a large grass, that's going to give you the feel of privacy. You're going to be somewhat protected from it. But again, it's kind of blowing in the wind. It's a little bit more whimsical. So you're still seeing through it. You're not just like completely blocking your view.
It's not completely cut off.
And you could do like groupings too. So you could do like 3 of, the Hollywood junipers that are going to get really kind of big and crazy. And then you bring it down, you step it down with some ornamental grasses. Then you bring it back up so you can kind of create this kind of, meandering kind of privacy area.
And this goes back, you want to pick your sight lines. Where do you want to look? And so another one, you were talking about specific plants that I love to use in a coastal environment is podocarpus, like upright podocarpus. Podocarpus mackie is a popular one, but again, you can get these hedges. It likes the sandy soil. And it's a really cool one that I like. And we've used that that in a lot of different applications to create privacy on the oceanfront, and they've done really well. So that's another one. Just if you're looking for a solution, Mike had some great ones. Like I said, live oak's hard to beat, but if you are trying to do like a more classic privacy hedge that's beach appropriate, and again, you can prune and keep them at different levels. Might be a little bit more maintenance to keep your sight lines, but it's worth it. You know, if you have something that gets up to the height you want it, just might need to keep it there.
Yeah, we'll throw out Russian olive too. I mean, Russian olive is a great one for even one by itself. They're a little wild. They're a little crazy. I mean, they grow fast. They get these really long, like, shoots that come out of them, but they give that kind of feel of the beach because you see them a lot if you're vacationing at the beach. But you also, it gives you kind of that natural kind of, it's got this kind of silvery kind of almost like straw color hue to it that makes you kind of feel beachy. It actually has a really fragrant bloom that happens in like the November, December time frame. Or maybe December, January. Right. You can't see the bloom typically, but you can smell it. It's kind of got that gardenia-like fragrance. It's a cool one.
It also kind of, it's not, but it kind of reminds me of willow trees too, that you see down in South Carolina a lot.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be like a live oak. I mean, you could plant a Yoshino cherry, out by, maybe you don't want it to get, coastal flooding, but, you could plant it. I'm just saying as a live oak, very slow growing, but think of trees too, creating privacy a little bit higher that you can see under.
And so you can prune things, it goes back to pruning and stuff like that. I mean, that's, you can lift up that canopy a little bit quicker than you might in the front area if you're trying to plant one in the front yard, is because you want to open up those sight lines. So you have a few branches, but that's kind of a cool aesthetic too.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Let's see what else we got here. Okay. Yes. So what would be a really simple upgrade homeowners can do right now to get a coastal vibe? Like if they went out to the store right now.
So Mike mentioned this earlier. To me, it's pots. It's pottery. So, one of my favorite things about pots is we're always trying to figure out how to create color and pops of color. Well, ceramic pots, and stuff like that, you can get that color year round with no, real requirements at all. So. But again, so you can go back to, there's some pots that are, have shelled themes if you're really trying to lean into the coastal feel. There are some that just going with blue pots, whether it's light blue, there's so many different shades of blue pots. And so I think to me, if you're saying just what can I do, go grab something, throw it in the car and come back and start to kind of create that, it would be going with the pots. And what I like about the pots is what we've been talking about is, the downside of not being able to plant everything you want. Right. Well, I always consider pots to be a little bit more of a temporary. You can play with them and experiment a little bit. So again, even as something we consider a house plant, a quote unquote house plant here. Right. It's a tropical, a lot of times those are going to fit that aesthetic, but you're basically accepting the fact that it's not going to winter unless you move the pot and protect it. But
it's a temporary thing. Yeah.
It's a temporary thing. And so I think pots, tropicals, hibiscus. There's just so many things that start rolling in this time of year that get, that are very exciting. And that kind of gives you more of that coastal tropical feel. And you can literally throw it in the back of your car, pot it up, and all of a sudden you can have kind of a coastal themed centerpiece for your backyard, your back deck. And
what kind of goes back to the just kind of starting out. You don't want to rip up all your beds,
right?
Just make yourself a little corner.
And you mentioned houseplants. Succulents. There's so many different colors of succulents, especially in that tropical indoor plant area. But you also perennial ones. But play with those. You're right. Putting different things in containers throughout the seasons. Changing your containers gives you a lot of fun, easy things that you can do for your landscape. I would say also think outside the box. We talked about the pottery. I think that's a great point. And I mentioned furniture and umbrellas earlier. Those are good, easy things that you can. But think of you could even get there's outdoor wall art now. That could be a beach scene. You could put a egret or a statue out that man, we've seen how many different coastal looks.
My heart's at the beach.
There's whale statues. There's lots of different statuary that can kind of give you that feel. A fountain might give you that kind of coastal feel. So there's lots and lots of different things that you could get. I'd say look at something that literally says it, like maybe not a flamingo, but for our area, it would be an egret or a blue heron statue that you'd stick out there. It could be even as simple as a stake. You can just stake it right in the ground, and it gives you some color and that feel of the nature has already started to notice that I want a coastal feel.
Well, running water that instantly makes me
Well,
feel
that's
like
exactly what I would say. That's a great point. The fountain, because you can get fountainets and things of all different sizes.
Yep.
It can go on a balcony. It can go on a
Right.
a back deck, or you can go even bigger with a bigger water feature. But again, running water. If you're trying to create the feel of coastal living, when you live maybe 50 miles from the coast or even further, that's a good way to do it. Just get that sound of running water, and I think instantly you're going to start to achieve
that helps so much.
For sure.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, do you guys have anything else for coastal landscaping? Any more quick
Yeah,
tips?
I mean, I would say, you can do it in any kind of area around your home. So whether it's sun or shade, there's always possibilities.
Sure.
And, there's lots of different plants that, like Daniel mentioned earlier, and we talk about a lot. I mean, we kind of mentioned tropical. It's not quite the same as coastal, but it's got a similar vibe and a similar feel. Think about the colors.
Yep.
Think about, the textures, the feels. That's kind of what gets you there. It doesn't have to be specific plant material. I think that's where we started, and I think that's a great place to end. Is like you don't get beholden to what you see when you're going visit Florida or a coast that you're used to kind of being around a cottage feel. You might not be able to plant those exact plants, but we can get you something very similar.
Sure.
Yeah, that'd be
Couldn't
great.
agree more.
All right.
All right.
I think that's it.
Well, great. That was a great discussion. So I hope you enjoyed this on coastal landscaping. We got lots and lots of ideas. Next week, we're going to be talking about our best blooming annuals for spring, which I think is a great topic, huge topic. I don't know how we're going to quite fit all that in there. But we'll be talking specifically about annuals that you can plant in the spring season. There's multiple different parts of the spring season. So we'll dive a little bit deeper into that discussion next week. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.